For 8 years now, John has been living alone in the remote taiga in a small hut far from society and civilization. Although it could hardly be called life, it's more like surviving. Taiga life is very harsh. Even for a physically fit, experienced, and knowledgeable person, it is sometimes very difficult to survive in such conditions. And John, although he was born in a remote taiga village, he had no taiga skills or experience. But he survived, and not only survived, but also considered himself a completely happy person. For the third day in the taiga, snow fell continuously, covering the very roof of the hut. John walked through the deep snow, trying not to disturb the silence of the taiga forest. For any hunter, big snow is good luck. Although it interfered with walking, it gave away any animal. Any trace was clearly visible on the white, snowy blanket. He thought to himself that he did the right thing by going in the morning. There was a premonition that he would definitely be lucky today. If only there was no misfire, as sometimes happened, otherwise he only had 3 cartridges left. The first winter and summer flew by unnoticed. John already felt like a real taiga dweller, but he became like this only thanks to Stepan Kenny, an old experienced hunter. Kenny then suggested that he hide in the taiga, in his taiga hut, when John told him then, upon meeting, that bandits and the police were looking for him. He was a man with great patience and golden hands. Everything he needed, he did everything himself, from construction to a variety of small things around the house, and by nature, he was always calm and balanced. He did everything slowly, deliberately, and conscientiously. Not once did John hear him swear or lose his temper, and he tried to pass on everything that he had accumulated during his taiga life, all the skills and experience, to John. Kenny taught him a lot. Without this knowledge, John would hardly have been able to live alone in these harsh places, and he was very grateful to this simple but kind-hearted man. At first, the old man often came to John's hut, bringing food and various little things necessary for life. One day, he brought as a gift an old tulka and a cartridge belt with cartridges. Luckily, John had no limits. The man rejoiced at this gift, like a boy. While Kenny was nearby, John did not notice any loneliness or hardships. He always felt support and help, but in the second winter, he had to experience for himself what it was like to be alone, when you're alone. And around, for tens of kilometers, there are no souls, only the endless mother taiga. Kenny still didn't come. John didn't know what to think. He ran out of food long ago. He was starving. He had to eat only what he could get. But he shot extremely rarely. He was afraid to disturb the forest silence, and he didn't waste the cartridges, of which he had very little left. Mostly he set traps that the old man taught him. John walked quietly, slowly walking through the white veil, knowing well that he had nowhere to rush now and that time meant nothing to him. A decay began. It went somewhere to the right, into the hills, and was covered with low, young trees. The man stopped and looked around, but there were no souls around. In time, he had walked no more than 5 kilometers. There was no point in going further. John was about to turn around and retrace his steps when he heard the rustling of branches. Some kind of animal was moving straight towards him. Having quickly checked the gun, John began to look for a convenient place. But everything around was bare and there was nowhere to hide. Then he squatted down on one knee, cocked the gun, and listened. It was a deer. He heard the rustling of branches. John no longer doubted where the beast would jump out, and the man was lucky. The case belongs to him, 1 out of 1,000. This was his case. My heart was beating like a drum, ready to jump out of my chest. He could already hear snoring and rapid breathing. A huge deer with powerful mugs flew out from behind the trees, but when he saw the hunter, he stuck his hooves into the ground, tearing up the frozen soil like a plow. He turned around sharply, emitting a piercing roar. Almost without aiming, John fired. The animal immediately darted to the side, and quickly disappeared into the thicket. John was overcome with despair. The thought flashed through my head. I missed, and only now the taiga resident saw that the deer was being chased by several wolves. It was their prey. It was they who drove this animal right towards him. Not paying attention to the hunter, they rushed past and disappeared after the deer. What he saw when he walked a little after the wolves was beyond his understanding. In the middle of a small clearing, not far from where John shot, lay a deer. He was dead. Several wolves sat around him with grins. They were breathing heavily, sticking out their tongues to the ground. Seeing John, they leaned back a little and bared their teeth. A couple more seconds and perhaps they would have rushed at him, protecting their prey. But the hunter's strange behavior stopped them. In this world, everyone survived as best they could, and it turned out that one survived at the expense of the other. The man was suddenly overcome with such delight that he could not contain his emotions. He jumped up and screamed with joy like crazy. A huge mountain of meat towered on the white snow. There was a small hole visible on the outstretched neck. It was just a miracle he didn't miss. The bullet hit the deer. The animal did not have time to go far, but the wolves caught up with the wounded deer and finished it off. Now they lay down in the snow, keeping an eye on the hunter, watching from afar, waiting. Ignoring the predators, John got down to business. He cut out several large pieces of pulp and, having filled his backpack, with difficulty threw it onto his back. Suddenly, the wolves, as if sensing something, jumped to their feet and quickly disappeared into the thicket. There was only one left lying in the snow, which looked like a very young wolf. Blood was oozing from his hind thigh. The paw was torn at the base and was held together by a kind word. Apparently, the wounded animal managed to catch him with its muzzles. He felt sorry for this dumb creature, looking at the man with aloof eyes. He already thought about shooting him, but abandoned this idea. There were only 2 cartridges left. The wolf looked at John with such sad eyes, and his gaze tore his soul apart. Having walked about 50 meters, John suddenly heard a piercing and terribly plaintive howl behind him. The sound made his blood run cold. Hearing this howl was unbearably sickening. This howl turned his soul inside out. John hardly believed that he could bring this early predator to the hut, but he had already decided and would no longer be able to refuse his own decision. The taiga man with difficulty dropped to his knees and carefully lifted the animal from the ground. The wolf whined pitifully, grabbing his sheepskin coat with his teeth, but not much. He was in a lot of pain. It was no less difficult for the hunter, but already in his heart. Covered with prickly heat and staggering in all directions, John went back to his hut. Night was falling on the taiga. Throwing off his backpack, he carried the wolf into the hut and laid it on the sunbed. I lit a candle. Somewhere there was a needle and nylon threads. There was not enough light, but there was no other light. The wounded animal lost a lot of blood and could die at any moment. In almost complete darkness, almost by touch, John sewed up the crumbling edges of the skin. I literally sewed my leg on. The wolf behaved quite decently and never flinched. It was a very young wolf, an ordinary wolf, of which there were many running around the taiga. So unexpectedly, a wolf, a faithful friend and helper, appeared in John's life. John had many different dangerous situations over the years. Not once was he on the brink of death. One day, I didn't calculate my strength, and with great difficulty, I was returning through the winter taiga to the hut. There were only 2 kilometers left, no more, but it felt like we had to walk all 6. I had absolutely no strength to even lift my leg. My consciousness slowed down from fatigue. I really wanted to lie down and rest. Very dangerous thoughts. You should not give in to them. But still, I found strength in myself, hobbled somehow to the hut, and didn't take that risk again, and didn't go that far. This life is a strange thing. Today you are alone in this world, and tomorrow you already have a friend, A wolf!